Hi, Dave.
Hi, Sandy. What are we talking about today?
We are talking about we are so prepared for this too. We are talking
We
about
are.
evoking. We are always prepared. We're talking about evoking awareness. And this episode is part of our series on the different parts of a coaching session. So be sure to check out the previous two episodes on starting a session and setting the agreement slash agenda, whatever you want to call it. So, evoking awareness, this is a competency for the ICF, International Coaching Federation. It's competency 7 out of the 8 competencies. So, it has its own competency. It's that important. And we'll put a copy of those competencies in the show notes below. But Dave and I want to be clear that evoking awareness is not a one and done question or something you tick off a list or a script. I know a lot of us work from scripts when we're first starting out, but evoking awareness should be seen throughout the session. For those of you watching, I'm opening up my arms wide very expansively. So it's something you see in every session, the first session, the chemistry session, the last session when you're closing out a coaching relationship, every session in between from beginning to end. Evoking awareness is super important, whether or not you're following the ICF competencies, doesn't matter what kind of coach you are. This is sort of the meat of the session, wouldn't you say, Dave?
Absolutely. Evoking awareness through skillful inquiry can be seen anywhere through the session, everywhere. So it's super, super important for coaches to get good at that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've said evoking awareness about 20 times now. What is evoking awareness exactly? What does it mean in a nutshell?
Yeah, so I pulled this from ICF. Seems very short and sweet, but it facilitates client insight and learning by using tools and techniques such as powerful questioning, silence, metaphor, or analogy.
That was short and sweet. Thank you, Dave. Dave is not known for being short and sweet. Well, maybe
I'm very
physically,
sweet, though.
but
Well,
yeah, but you should see these show notes. Dave always has like all these amazing notes and insights and thoughts, and it's like, yeah, getting down to the short and sweet. That's perfect. And I'm kind of drawn to that word silence as a means for evoking awareness. It's interesting. So we'll circle back around to silence later. Um, but yeah, so for me, this is the most important part of a coaching session. It's all important, but this is what coaching is all about. And awareness, I like to say awareness is the first step. Without it, there's probably not going to be any change, any motivation, any desire to change. Would you agree with that?
absolutely. Yeah, so many things that awareness could be generated for. Things like how they might feel about something, put a name on the feelings, and other things going on inside them, and also underneath. Awareness of what the root causes are. That's often very hidden to people. Um, and
Mm.
then uncovering what is the real problem to resolve. What is actually sitting on the surface level and what is not. What's underneath, what's hidden, and then what emerges once awareness has been created, which also it could require more inquiry to develop.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I've listened to some sessions where there is very little evoking awareness, and like there's a lot of checking in, there's a lot of planning, but hardly any evoking awareness.
Hmm.
And like that's what coaching is about. Obviously, I'm a little passionate about this. But for me, those coaches are more personal assistants than coaches. It's like you're checking in, you're helping them plan something. It's like, where's the coaching? You know? So, with all that in mind, maybe it would be helpful to give some examples of how evoking awareness actually shows up in a session. What do you think?
Sure. How about starting at the top when a client might want to check in as they come into a session? Um, this is just not a check in, but a great place also to evoke awareness around what they've learned, how whatever homework or activities they might have been doing prior to the session, what are they getting out of it?
Yeah, and again, I hear some coaches say, you know, Is there anything, well, I say, is there anything you want to share that's happened since last time? Some coaches ask, how did your goals go? This and that, blah, blah. And then that's it. And there's no evoking, but it's like great place to ask, like, what did you learn? What would you do differently? What are you taking away from that experiment? You don't have to go into a big, huge thing, but a few little questions just to, sort of cement whatever learning happened or didn't happen. Great place to evoke awareness.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then, yeah,
It's
go ahead.
oh, go ahead. I
Nope,
was just
go
going to
ahead.
say it's a great way to continue the coaching process because you don't want to start something completely new, especially if they've forgotten about it or something like that. But it's a great way to kind of keep the client moving along some path to some stated and desired end state. So yeah, very
Right, you're
important.
talking about like the overarching coaching relationship, like to keep that thread going through each session. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, good points. So there's the beginning, and then there's evoking awareness to find the agenda or agreement. So we haven't even set the agenda yet. And if you missed that episode, we talked a lot about setting the agenda, setting the agreement in a previous episode. Be sure to check that out. We'll link it in the show notes for you. And again, I keep referring to the sessions I review, but especially with new coaches, sometimes there's very little evoking before setting the agenda. And I get it. I was there once. We just want to set the agenda and then move on. Maybe we're under a time constraint. That 30-minute practical skills assessment, that's a thing. The 30-minute time limit. But sometimes, as a result, the agenda is set prematurely before really understanding what is causing the client to be stuck or in need of a coach. What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
I've seen this too, where a client comes in saying, my topic is this, and I want tools for that. So we believe the client when the client seems so certain they want something and that whatever it is they're asking for solves their issue. However, without further exploration, we may never have some certainty as to whether what they come in as a coaching topic and the proposed solution is really going to help them or not.
Mhm.
I will also say that I've had instances where I did end up still giving them exactly what they asked for. Why you might end up there could be a bunch of reasons. Say you're on a 30-minute kind of time clock and clock is ticking. So you try to evoke and try to get somewhere, but still that's what they want. So you end up just giving it to them. This is where, the client potentially may remain adamant that, no, I want those tools, right? I want to know
Mhm.
how to sleep better. It's like, okay, all right. So
Right, right,
they might want that, but it also could mean that the client maybe isn't quite ready for that exploration, right? And maybe they need to experience the solutions first to see if they will work for them. And sometimes they may actually work. It may be all that the client will need, but oftentimes they need that revealing, if you will, that just these simple habits, tools, or whatever it is that they asked for didn't quite get them where they really wanted to go. So we have to be open to that too, to almost use these kind of things as a test for them. And then sometimes I've had clients come in looking for information. Now that's not quite coaching, and maybe it's fine to have that as part of your business or part of your activities, but it's not coaching though. And so you can decide whether you want to give that information or not. But that's some of the reasons why we might end up giving the client what they may be asking for. However, in nearly all cases though, the client only kind of knows where they want to start, right? They kind of know something they feel they needs resolving, but they don't really fully know what the issue is or what's behind this topic, like what's generating these feelings of I need change here. So with skillful inquiry, we can generate awareness of what that thing beneath the thing is, the real root causes, and then help the client move towards a solution that will not just be a Band-Aid, but something that they can transform their relationship with the issue and hopefully provide longer and more full lasting resolution to whatever that is they brought.
Yeah, well said. Two things came up for me. And the first is that we've said this before, the client really doesn't know what they want. I mean, they might have a topic or a focus. They might, and yeah, they might want those tools. Um, but it's up to us to evoke to see what's really underneath what's going on. And the second thing that came up as you were talking is the importance of meeting the client where they're at.
Hmm.
Maybe they just want tools, and you can try to, do that little evoking, ask questions. Maybe they don't want to go there, and that's your sign to, okay, they're not ready. Um, but yeah, well said. Well said. So it is really important to do a lot of evoking before setting the agenda. I mean, we got to try even if the client isn't ready to go there, right?
Absolutely. The more skilled we get as coaches, the better we get at evoking awareness. And
Yeah.
then the better we can help the client realize that what will truly resolve the issue they came in with versus what they may be asking for at the outset. So from a coaching perspective, there's a strategic consideration of narrowing to the root cause and narrowing to that agenda as we generate this awareness.
Right. And I've had some sessions where it's like we're just evoking awareness like the whole session and we never quite get to the agenda. And as a new coach, that may sound frightening. I know when I was first starting out, it's like, I gotta find the agenda. Where's the agreement? And it was like a lot of pressure I put on myself. And now I've really relaxed and like, all right, still don't know what you want, still don't know where we're going. So just keep asking those questions. And there's been sessions where we don't get there, but there's so much awareness that comes forward that the client is done. Like stick a fork in them, they're done. And it's like, okay, that's the session. And that's okay because it's in service to the client, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there's this notion that we get hammered into ourselves in coaching school where it's got to follow this structure and it's got to go through this whole path. And if it doesn't, you've somehow failed. But it's actually the real world is much more different than that. It's nice to have the full structure every time. Or you can kind of argue, well, you know what, even if the whole session was evoking, you actually did get the whole structure there because they did get to an interesting place of awareness change, right? Shift and all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
we still did a good job. We still had great coaching presence. Maybe it doesn't pass an ICF recording test, and that's fine. But man, you did a great service to the client. I've seen that with more than one client. Sometimes awareness alone can be enough to generate a solution or for them to come to resolution on their own. Once they realize what is really behind the problem they're experiencing, they can often resolve it on their own, right? They just need to kind of go away and kind of reflect and think about it for a while.
Mhm.
It's definitely not the norm, though. Most people need more coaching to figure out how to resolve the thing behind the thing.
Right, right. So we have evoking during the check-in, evoking during the exploration of the agenda or agreement, and then we have evoking after the agreement up until we get to the planning stage of the session, which we will talk about in our next episode. Um, so I mean, and there's even evoking in the planning and in the closing, right? But okay, bottom line, there's a lot of evoking that goes on in a proper coaching session. So let's talk about how to evoke awareness in your client, and then we'll offer some thoughts on how to improve the skill. So, Dave, you mentioned curiosity here in our little doc that we have going. How important is it for coaches to have curiosity? Shall we explore this a little bit, this topic of curiosity?
Yes, definitely. Curiosity is maybe one of those base level things that you must have in order to evoke awareness, is just simply being able to wonder what is going on in the client. What's going on with this problem? Why are they having the problem? What's behind it? What's all that thing? Um, Now, that curiosity needs to be directed. So you really want to have some kind of notion in the back of your head as you're asking these questions, some strategic direction of inquiry. So instead of it being kind of undirected, which could lead you into all sorts of random places, but you want to be able to drive towards some goal. So just enough information for the client to be able to state that goal for the session. You want to be able to get that curiosity going till you start feeling like those important thing behind the thing elements are kind of coming out, and then make something of it. Because undirected curiosity can get you lost in inquiry and lead you to
Mm-hmm.
places that are irrelevant to the conversation, the coaching conversation, and maybe even the goals of the client. It could waste session time. It could even get you to places of, I guess I call it danger, where
Mm.
potentially they may be going to some place of trauma or something experienced in the past that you may not know how to get out of, or a place that maybe they need more clinical help to handle. So that's something that you definitely want to put an eye on. It could also kind of confuse the agenda as well. So
Mm-hmm.
if they're just all over the place, you're just talking, and at some point you're like, I'm not sure where that's going, but and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you reach timeout, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah. I love this idea of directed curiosity versus undirected. And I've had sessions where I ask a question, it goes off the rails down some path of like something that's not even connected. It's like, oh, that was a bad question. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe not a bad question, but badly placed question, we'll put it that way. And so, yeah, we have to be really intentional and thoughtful about our line of inquiry and reflections to, narrow that focus instead of going off the rails or going down another path. Um, yeah, I wrote that down, directed curiosity. I just like the sound of that. It's good. Thanks, Dave.
You bet.
Love it. I was like, ooh, it's good. Yeah, what else?
Yeah, as you're saying that, what comes to mind is what happens if the client is all over the place a little bit, and you're
Yeah.
trying to use your directed curiosity skills to kind of move this inquiry in a certain direction. Um, I mean, one thing you can always ask is like, okay, given all we've talked about today, right now in this session, where would you like the session to go from here? What would be most helpful from the session today?
Hmm.
All right. You can also ask how those things they've put out there are related. So
Yeah.
those are the kind of things that can potentially take your um, unintentional, undirected curiosity and bring it back to some place where you can kind of take the session. Um,
Yeah.
Another thing I was thinking about is,
Mm.
well, how do you be curious in the first place? Now, you would think that everybody knows how to be curious, but as someone who has gone through this, I will put forth that even though I knew what curious meant, and I'm generally a curious person about a lot of things, for some reason, I just could not be effectively curious for coaching. Oh my God, it was such a
You, yeah, you're
amazing
laughing. So
thing.
what's that about?
It's there were blocks that I had to work on. So I offer this in
Mm.
terms of you may be you may think you're curious. You may actually be curious in certain contexts, but potentially in the coaching conversation context, you may find that curiosity somehow is stymied in whatever way, who knows. So, and we'll talk more about kind of removing some of the blocks and barriers a little later, but man, I needed mentor coaching to help me get through that.
Well, yeah, let me ask you this. I mean, you're a personal trainer, fitness coach, correct? And I mean, you've helped me with a few physical things. And you're very good at directing, offering, questioning, like that inquiry into like what's going on here with your legs and your ankles and what's going on here with your back and notice this and blah blah blah. I don't know where my question's going, but I'm curious. Like it seems like those skills didn't translate to coaching, or maybe those skills were more coming from like a teacher or like a directive point of view in your fitness with your fitness clients. What would you say about that?
How interesting. That's a great observation. And you could see where that is curiosity.
Yeah.
It is maybe in a context I was more comfortable with because I've been doing that a lot longer than coaching. It is also, I don't know if you want to call it more clinical or whatever, but we have to get at those things to be able to find where whatever exercise we were doing, where to take that next, and what could be potential barriers and things. And through me asking, then that would bring forth sensations in you physically, theoretically, that you might not have had before or noticed before. So in that sense, it's totally related to this, but yet I could not do it.
That's so
Fascinating, isn't it?
interesting. It is. It's fascinating. And you also mentioned in the notes here, having a focus on the self. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that could be something that I've seen actually in a few people. We're in clients. I've been working with them on communication and stuff. Where how can you have an effective conversation with somebody else? Well, it's a give and take, right? It's like you ask questions and you answer a little bit, right? It goes back and forth. But yet some people, for some reason, could not do that. And in their case, one of the reasons was just simply too much focus on the self, right? We only care about ourselves. And oftentimes we're like that, we're selfish or whatever. But for some reason, there was so much focus on how great I am, and I want to get my story out and all that kind of thing, where you end up just not realizing that the other person actually has something to share too, and that it's a kind of give and take in that case. So that could also be at play here in terms of coaching, where you feel like you have the answers, you feel like you have the expertise, maybe, right? A lot of things we can maybe we have to do an episode on coach-led versus non-coach-led at some point. Right? That's a big deal.
Got a lot to say about that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we always do. And but once we cannot release our own self from what's happening, detaching, we like to talk about that too. Then that could definitely be a block towards just wondering, like, what's the thing? Like, instead of you saying, oh, I know what's going on here, I got the answer, we're just going to do that and this person will be fine. But you never know until you go. I've had so many cases, you probably too, where I thought it was one thing and I was like, a little thing's kind of niggling in the back of my head. And then a couple inquiries like, oh, that's the thing beneath the thing, not the thing I was thinking of. So that's always needs to be verified, right? Through questioning, right? Getting it straight from the client. But if we focus on ourselves, we don't care about that. We just care about what we think.
That's right.
So how do we break that?
Yeah, and curiosity goes out the window in terms of what the other person is experiencing. And what I'm hearing is that sounds like a coach who's focused on themselves too much could use a mentor coach.
Absolutely.
Coaches need a coach.
Yeah.
Episode 2, people, or 3, whatever it was. Anyway, all about mentor coaching. Yeah, so you also had a great list of skills and techniques that might be super helpful for evoking awareness. Do you want to take some time and go through that list?
Absolutely.
Say yes, Dave.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. So what would be helpful for new coaches to work on that skill of evoking awareness?
Well, first, something that they always taught us that probably is something you all have heard before is just simply asking open questions versus closed questions. So questions that don't just yield one-word answers like yes or no, that's it, or the number 1 or 10 or whatever like that. But instead, start questions with things like what or how, right? That would start letting people have the ability to answer in much more unique ways, right? And whatever's going on inside them versus just thinking about that one answer that is the correct one.
Yeah, agree totally. These are also called powerful questions. And you can, I don't know, as a new coach, I was sort of sucked into like, oh, we have to ask powerful questions. That's the only way to evoke awareness. And obviously there's more ways to do that. But there's all sorts of lists you can find online of powerful questions. And most of them begin with what? Because if you ask a question that starts with what, you will not get a one-word answer. I guarantee it 100%. And some people talk about why, using the question, a question starting with why. And that might be okay in some instances, but I don't know, using why can come off as a little judgy.
Mhm.
Dave, why did you choose to do that? And it's like, oh, because. I mean, usually the answer starts with because, and then the client becomes defensive, and we don't want to do that to our clients. But starting with what is what I invite the coaching students I work with to do.
Yeah, that's using whys can be very challenging. There are definitely other words that are possible. Maybe where occasionally could be used. Um,
In what way would you use where, Dave?
well, you could say something like you get a line through a line of questioning, you go, hmm, where would you like to take this from here? Right? Or where would you like to move
Very good.
towards? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there
I
could be
like it.
some other words, question words that are possible too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, go
Other
ahead.
things that come to mind in terms of improving your ability to evoke awareness would be just simply having compassion for other people. Uh, Maybe even yourself, I guess, too, starting from there. But, generally having compassion for other people, um, building trust is hugely important, building that rapport with somebody else so that you can create that safe space for other people to open up. Because if they're not going to give you deep answers or clear answers or authentic answers, then coaching can be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to really get
Mhm.
anywhere with any of this stuff. So, yeah, not being judgmental. So, don't use why. Start with what.
Start with what?
Yeah, get off on the right foot. Don't be judgmental, or create the impression that you're being judgmental. That's super important.
Yeah, and even their body language, we can come off as being judgmental, or those not nonverbal, what do they call, like the utterances, like like that's pretty judgy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Or even like raising the eyebrows, like, oh, hmm, it's like, oh, she doesn't approve, and it's not about us, number one. But number
Mhm.
two, we don't want our clients to think that they are here to make us happy. It's not the point. So yeah, keeping everything as non-judgmental as possible really helps with the awareness to allow the space for awareness, for sure. Yeah, what
Yeah,
else?
what the use of the voice can be very effective here. You can use your voice to calm. Right? You might even be able to ask a why question if you ask it like, why would you want to do that? Maybe in a lower voice,
Hmm.
so that was less challenging. Um,
Hmm.
Now, on the other hand, you might want to challenge the clients, like, what does that have to do with blah blah blah, right? It's like so. Um, the use of voice can really create a place where the answer can come out depending on the situation. So
Hmm.
don't discount that. Don't be
Yeah,
monotone.
yeah, I like the idea of challenging and like use your voice. I often tell clients that I'm meeting for the first time, it's like, I don't push, I'm not a pushy coach, but I do challenge. And I will say, you know what, client, you said this last week, but today you're saying this. What's that about?
Mhm.
What's that about? And be playful too, like, what's that about? And then they'll laugh, they'll be like, oh yeah, oops. um, or maybe not, I mean, who knows? But yeah, using the voice, modulating the voice can be really effective.
Yeah. And then, what if you do all this stuff? You're building trust, you're asking great, powerful questions, using what and how, and you still are getting nowhere, right? Or maybe the client still goes, I don't know what I'm feeling, or I don't know what's going on, that kind of thing. And so there actually are other ways to inquire, to evoke awareness too. Um, it could be somatic inquiry, meaning inquiring through the body, or energetically, some of the things that some of us learned along the way. It could mean using different imagery or visualization if the mental inquiry is not yielding results. So there's a bunch of interesting things that you can do for people to kind of shift their current state into another sensing state that can allow something to emerge where previously, say, their mind was not for some reason.
Yeah, this is a big one. And, you know, in our culture, we're kind of a head-centered culture, and we live in our heads, and we're in the monkey mind, blah, 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 blah. And on top of that, I prefer that center. Prefer that thinking center over the, emotional heart center or the body intuitive center. That's where I live. Getting better at the other two. But, get to know your client and where they prefer to live. And they might be stuck in their heads. So yeah, then it's time to change tactics. I call it going in the back door. Like, where do you feel this in your body? Ooh, there's a where question. Where do you feel this in your body right now? And that'll stop them in their tracks. And they might not know. And I also want to say new coaches might need some training to learn how to take that inquiry further, because it's like, you feel it in your chest. What do I do now? What's my next question? Where's the script? So it's a different line of inquiry, for sure. And there was something else that came up that I forgot. But yeah, just different modes of inquiry instead of words can be really helpful.
Yeah, three other things just came to mind as you're speaking that. There's gremlin taming. That's a popular one. You can go look at the book where you give a voice, right? Somebody on your shoulders talking to you saying, oh, you can't do that. It's like, oh, well, what happens if you were to talk to that voice? What would you say, right? You can also look at the person. So if they're an artist, you can say, well, what if you were to draw a picture of this? What would that look like to you? Right? Like, so, right, shifting the tactics on them. You're a musical person, Sandy. So if you were to write a song about how you were feeling right now, would it sound like Mozart? Would it sound like rap or something else, right? Rave music? I don't know.
That's great.
So
Yeah, my mind just like was like, oh yeah, what would it sound like?
yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's exciting.
even if you could not vocalize it using your thinking side, there could be
Hmm.
something else inside you that could generate something that would give the coach and the client clues as to what's going on inside.
Yeah, yeah. And I remembered what I wanted to say, and you kind of picked up on that and took it talking about metaphors and visuals. And I don't know if that right brain, left brain thing is a thing anymore. Maybe it's been debunked, but anyway, the creative side versus the rational, logical side, whatever. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, using metaphors and visuals, it activates a different part of the brain. So when we do that, client starts thinking in a different way. And if a client drops a metaphor, I will pick it up. So if they drop that, I'm going to be picking it up and running with it and asking them about it. Um, I have a client who is in the film industry, so she already uses a lot of photography, metaphors, visuals, editing film, blah blah blah. So it's a lot of fun to just inquire about, like, so what would it look like to, just edit some stuff out, just leave it on the editing room floor as you move forward in your life, and just get them to think in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Now, after trying all that, what if you're still
just a
not getting
lot.
anywhere? uh, well, one thing I could offer is you might hone your intuition. What is your intuition picking out of what's being said, or even watching their body, right? What does their facial expression look like? Is there tension somewhere? Is there some nervous twitch happening? The breathing pattern, did it change? Did they just do right? Was there a sigh, right? uh, Denoting maybe a relaxation, right? Or maybe they were getting antsy, or maybe their shoulders are going up and getting tight. So all these kind of things can give clues as to what is going on inside that they may not even be aware of. You see the big sigh, you go, hey, I just noticed you let out that big sigh. What's happening for you just now? and they might all of a sudden have something really interesting to say about that. So,
Yeah, great points. Body language can be so telling, and clients might not even realize what they're doing. Um, we tend to be, again, in our culture, we tend to be so disassociated from our bodies that we don't know what's going on with them. So it's kind of a special place we're in as coaches to be able to witness what's going on in our clients and reflect that back. We'll have a whole episode about reflections. We're not talking about reflections today. We got a lot to say, but to reflect back, like I noticed, like you've been yawning a couple times. Like, what's opening up for you as we're talking? Because yawning can be, release of energy or something, opening up. But yeah, clients might not even notice what they're doing. Yeah, great points. Great points. So yeah, you did mention questions. We talked about questions, open-ended questions, and I just mentioned reflections, and we're going to do a separate episode on that. But yeah, when it comes to evoking awareness, it's not, obviously, we just talked through a bunch of stuff. It's not just about questions, right?
yeah, definitely not. Even though we'll do a fuller episode on reflections as a topic all its own, they do play an important part in this process of evoking awareness. Because think about if they just gave an answer and then you just asked a question, they gave another answer and you just asked another question, what kind of interaction might that feel like? But
Third
if you were to,
degree.
yeah, third degree, yeah.
Third degree.
Got the light on you. Where were you on the night of the
Uh-huh.
15th?
Exactly.
Yeah, so therein lies we could talk a little about the role of reflections in generating awareness, where it is important, right? It shows, it generates rapport and trust, so that real awareness can emerge. Shows that you've been listening, right, and also understanding. A skillful reflection extracts the most important elements and sends it back to the client. So it generates for you, right, further inquiry, right? So sometimes that reflection, even as you're reflecting, you may not have that question just yet, but as you're kind of reflecting, you're like, oh, that's the question I need to ask in the next one. So it's got it plays many different roles in evoking awareness. So definitely something we will talk about later, and something for all coaches to get really good at too.
Yeah, that's so true. I found that sometimes I reflected something back to a client and they were like, wait, I just said that? Wow. And it's like all of a sudden there's this new awareness. They weren't even aware of what they were saying, and now they are. That's evoking awareness. It's magic. It's magic. Coaching is magic.
Yes, it is magic.
So, yeah, it's magical. So, in the ICF definition you read at the top of the episode, it mentioned silence as a means to evoke awareness. And this, again, this stood out to me. It's like, ooh, that's good. What are your thoughts on silence as a means to evoking awareness?
Yes, definitely. Leaving others alone in their thoughts allows their awareness to develop. So they sit for a while, in their newly discovered feelings and thoughts. We don't want to interrupt that with more questioning or even speech, right? It may interrupt that process for them to develop it further. Sometimes we can tell like there's something going on inside. So just shut up, keep your mouth shut, and just watch
Yeah.
until you get some sign. You eventually you kind of get good at knowing, might be able to jump in with something now. But oftentimes you can tell there's still something going on up here, and that you may find that almost always, if you just leave them alone, don't say anything, almost always something good comes out of that.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. And I invite new coaches to get to know their clients' habits and ticks. I mean, we all got them. Um, because a lot of new coaches, I don't use the word afraid of silence, but they're just unsure. They're like, oh, I need to ask a question. I need to say something to cover up the silence. I've been using the phrase as a culture, but in our culture, silence is kind of just trampled upon. So we as coaches to be able to offer that silence, that space, is pretty special. And as you're getting to know your clients, it might be easier over video to learn their tells, like when they're done thinking, not just speaking, but thinking. But I invite students to like notice, like, did they just take a breath? Are they going to say more? Give them a chance. A lot of clients look up. A lot of people look up when they're thinking. Like, I'm not done yet. I'm still looking up. Like, don't interrupt me. Like, allow that space. Or sometimes they look down, if they're really getting internally like focused, they might just look down. I have a couple clients who will say a word when they're done, and sometimes it's yeah, 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 and they're done. But get to know your clients' habits.
Yeah, usually when
I'm
the
done.
eyes come back to you, yeah, that's usually when they're like, oh, they're ready for me to say something, right? They're ready for
Yeah,
the coach to say something.
yeah, yeah, and not everyone coaches over video. So this, if you're coaching over the phone, I hope you have a good connection so you can really hear the breathing and the subtle shifts. I don't coach a lot over the phone, but it's definitely a separate skill to develop, I think.
Yeah.
So, Dave, yeah, anything else to add there?
No, I was just thinking about there all the times when Zoom wasn't working well. We had to turn off the video in order to be able to just get
Oh,
the
yeah,
voice going. So it still happens. Um,
it's true. Yeah.
but yeah, we can talk more about that probably in another episode. It might be interesting. Oh, we should do an episode where we turn off our video cameras and do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a side thought. But yeah, there's a lot of sensing that
Mhm.
has to happen when you don't have your visual going on, but you still have hearing, right? You have your intuition going for sure.
Intuition is big, big for you. I know I'm still developing that in myself, but yeah, it's a good skill to develop. And speaking of skills, so what can coaches do to practice and improve this particular skill of evoking awareness?
Yeah, so maybe some tips and guidelines. Let's
Yeah.
see. We've already talked about starting a question with what or how, making sure you ask open questions and not closed. And we've talked about some of those
Mhm.
exceptions, maybe the where, careful use of why. um,
Yeah. And even how questions, I invite the coaches I work with to keep it to what until you get to planning, because planning can be more directive, like how are you going to do that? How blah blah blah. Um, but yeah, yeah. What? We already talked about what. What else?
yeah, another one is just simply practicing with a friend or some trusted party. Uh, have a conversation with them just using what and how questions and see how it goes. See how
Mhm.
it feels actually to do it. You may actually find some very great relationship building that will happen when you don't go, direct someone how to do something or or just trying to get to the answer or problem solve, but instead just validating what they're saying through what and how questions. It can be very great for any kind of conversation just to practice like that.
Mhm. Agree, agree. And what about silence? How can a coach improve that skill of being still, of being patient?
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot that could be done there. Generally, we just need to learn how to be okay with silence on our end. It can be really uncomfortable for a lot of reasons. There could be things like worrying about being judged by the client or the other person in front of us. What are they thinking about in that silence? Is it about me, right? Is there something I've done wrong? So a lot of these feelings that may be coming up on ourselves, this discomfort that we're having with that silence, could be a lot of things need further work through mentor coaching, quite frankly.
Yeah, coaches need a coach. And I keep going back to like what you said, like when the eyes come back to you, the coach, that's kind of when they're done. Like until that point, like just let them be, Enjoy the silence. Enjoy it. It's not about you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, What some barriers or challenges be to developing and executing good evoking awareness skills?
Let's see. Well, you and I both work for big coaching firms where our sessions are bound by 30 minutes, which is a tough
Mm-hmm.
time limit to hit, even under the best of circumstances. So that can be stressful to our
Yeah.
evoking awareness. So time considerations like that. Even getting towards the end of an hour session, maybe you kind of see the clock kind of running out. You're like, okay, I better get somewhere. Another one is just getting lost in the story, where the questions that are so there's whatever they're coming back with is so interesting that you just keep asking and asking and asking, and like, oh my God, we only have 15 minutes left, and we haven't done anything except have a conversation about something.
Yeah,
So
yeah. This is a big one I see with new coaches. And they want I'm seeing them as wanting to show that they care and that they're invested in their clients' well-being. So they ask questions about the story. Um, but that's what friends are for. You're not their friend, you're their coach. So leave the story, ask about the person, ask about this, narrow it down. But yeah, it can be easy to get caught up in story for sure.
yeah, there could be other barriers, triggers specifically. Um, Things like when you think you know what the client needs because you've actually been there before, right? Something you've experienced in your past, maybe triggering to you to stop that curiosity that we've talked about before, and you start kind of driving the client down. It's like, well, what if you were to do this, or what if you were to try journaling, or what if you were to try this, blah blah blah. So that can often
Yeah.
start pushing you down the coach-led side of things, because of something that you've experienced before.
Yeah, I see a lot of leading in sessions from new coaches. And that's, we're excited. We want to help. But what worked for us may not work for a client, and it's not up to us.
Yep. And we've talked about the lack of curiosity. Why would that be? A focus on ourselves too much, perhaps. Fear of saying or asking the wrong thing. Fear of going to a place where you don't know how to get out of, like a place requiring therapy. They've always kind of hammered that into us, where like, oh, stay in your lane, don't go into therapy side of things and all that kind of thing. So you may actually fear that you might reach a place where you don't know how to get out of. So a lot of
Yeah.
these kind of places really could mean that you need mentor coaching to help you get out of that.
Need, but every coach needs a coach.
Absolutely.
Episode 3, 2. I forget which one it was.
That's right. We'll
Yeah.
remember it by the end of the
Yeah.
episode, hopefully. Speaking of mentor coaching,
Mm.
there were two things that came through my mentor coaching that might be useful to you all. The first one is what I call the what exercise. So as you're kind of going through the inquiry and you're trying to form that next question, just blurt out what. Like before you can even think of the question, just say the word what. It's interesting because it kind of forces you down that line through almost social engineering, where it's like, I can't pull that back now that I pulled it out there. So I better form a question that makes sense, that starts with what or how or whatever that you started with. So that can be a
That's
way to
good.
just, yeah,
I
socially
hadn't heard that one
engineering
before.
wise, yeah,
Yeah.
shift yourself
Yeah.
down the what path.
Yeah, it's good.
Another one is more down the coach-led side of things, which is try removing "I think that" out of your language for emails, live conversations, whatever. Just forget about that, because it also forces you into a different way of forming whatever comes out.
Mhm.
So that might be fun to play with too.
Yeah, totally agree on that last one. I always invite coaches to remove the I completely from their sessions. And, once in a while it's fine. Once in a while it's fine. But when you're starting out, like get in the habit of just taking it completely out of whatever you say. This can be seen as leading. And if you're submitting sessions either to your coach training school, national board, ICF, they might pick up on that. And if you continually say I think or I this or that, it's leading, and the client may, depending on the client, maybe they want to please you. Maybe they're like, okay, well, I really want her to think highly of me because she thinks a lot. And then it's like, it's not about you. It's not about you. So yeah, take the I out of your coaching conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally, the goal of your coach's internal condition should be one of being open, detached from whatever's happening on the client side, sensing, relaxed. If you're not relaxed, that sensing is going to go out the window. Be receptive and clear, open heart, right? Open gut, all that. Use your whole body to sense if you know what to do with that. Keep all your senses open, right? All 5 or 6, depending on what you subscribe to, but
Right.
sense with everything you've got. And that will help with you generating that curiosity that's needed for evoking awareness.
The word detached stood out to me. I was once so attached to like the outcomes that my clients either achieved or didn't achieve, and I carried a lot of that around, like, I'm not doing enough as a coach. And it's like what you just said: if you are open, relaxed, if you are sensing, if you are present, if you're curious, that is enough for the client. Absolutely. Yeah. So what else? Did we miss anything before moving on? Anything you want to add?
No, not at this moment.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about what ICF says?
ICF. Yeah. So ICF has a competency specifically called Evoking Awareness. When we talk about the ICF and the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaches. So while the ICF has that competency, National Board does not have one dedicated to this skill. However, it is sprinkled throughout their guidelines. And I reviewed those before getting on this call to record this episode, and it's really interesting. So some words and phrases really stood out to me from the National Board that are mentioned more than once. So they do use the word evokes a few times. Elicits, another great word. Explores, curious or curiosity. And they also use the word invite, as in invites the client to ... For example, invites the client to explore a broader perspective, reflect on past learnings and successes. So that would be like checking in at the top of a session. Invites the client to share takeaways at the end of the session. So we are evoking awareness until the very end of the session. And for me, all of this said, the bottom line is that if a coach is curious, patient, and invites the client to explore all angles of a topic or focus for the session, that is evoking awareness. What do you think, Dave?
Awesomely said, and agree. All of it.
That's it. Any final thoughts?
Short and sweet.
Yeah, short and sweet. Back to short and sweet. Any other thoughts?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think we've covered it pretty well. We'll leave some resources in the show notes as always. And where can people find you, Sandy?
SwansonCoaching.com. Where can people find you, Dave?
CoachDshen.com.
Awesome. Good to see you. We'll see everyone next time. Bye.
See you next time. Bye.